There's this quote from an Australian Prime Minister that is absolutely seared into my brain. Well, may we say, God save the Queen.
Because nothing will save the Governor-General.
That's Gough Whitlam. It's 1975, and he's standing out the front of what was then Parliament House because he's just been fired by the Governor-General. This guy, Sir John Kerr. He's the only Governor-General to boot out a Prime Minister in Australian history. It was a big deal.
Whitlam knows what he's doing.
I'm not actually terribly interested in politics.
He's been fired.
Fired, wonderful.
So, how did Whitlam go from winning an election in 1974 to being fired a year later? We'll get there. But first, I want to give you a bit of background on this chapter of Australian politics, simply known as the dismissal.
With the exit of Sir Robert Menzies, things in Canberra will not be quite the same.
Before Gough Whitlam was Prime Minister, the Liberal Country Party coalition had been in power for 23 years. Over that time period, they won 9 consecutive elections. And a lot of that time, this guy was Prime Minister. That's Sir Robert Menzies. And to this day, he is Australia's longest-serving PM. Anyway, he retired in 1966, and over the next 6 years, the coalition had 4 different leaders, so their grip on political power was slipping a bit. Over those 20-something years, Gough Whitlam had got into politics and worked his way up to become leader of the Labor Party. When the 1972 federal election rolled around, he felt people were ready for change. He had big promises to modernise Australia, both socially and economically, and move the country past the post-war years of the 50s and 60s.
It's time to create new opportunities for Australians.
All of these ideas Mr. Whitlam summed up in a pretty simple 2-word phrase. It's time.
Time for freedom, time for moving, it's time to begin, yes it's time.
He won the election and could not wait to get to work. Like, literally. While votes were still being counted and none of his cabinet ministers had been confirmed, Mr. Whitlam gave himself and his Deputy Prime Minister Lance Barnard 27 different portfolios to look after. They were known as the Triumvirate, or two-man ministry, and in the space of 14 days, these two fellas made 40 significant decisions. They brought any Aussie troops still fighting in the Vietnam War home, pardoned anyone who refused conscription in that war, officially recognised the People's Republic of China, and a bunch more. And the changes didn't stop there. As Prime Minister, he introduced Australia's first universal healthcare system, made university free, lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. There were education reforms, housing reforms, arts funding. He ended the White Australia policy, he established the Ministry of Aboriginal Affairs, and he laid the groundwork for the Aboriginal Land Rights Act. You might have seen this photo of Mr. Whitlam pouring sand through the hand of Aboriginal stockman and land rights activist Vincent Lingari, giving the land back to the Gurindji people in the Northern Territory. In his first year, Mr. Whitlam passed 203 separate bills, more than any government had ever passed in a single year. Mr. Whitlam wanted to transform Australia, and he called this agenda the program. But first, let's take a little time out and learn about how he went about that. Okay, just a real quick crash course in Aussie politics. So, we have 2 houses of parliament, the red one and the green one. Or more officially, the upper house, known as the Senate, and the lower house, known as the House of Representatives. The House of Reps is probably the one you've seen before. It's where the Prime Minister sits, and it's the big one. Right now, there are 150 seats, and each of them represents an electorate somewhere across the country. For instance, I live in the electorate of Boothby, so my federal representative at the moment is Louise Miller-Frost. The party that holds a majority of seats here gets to form government. So right now, Labor has a majority, so their leader, Anthony Albanese, is the Prime Minister. The upper house, or the Senate, consists of 76 senators. 12 from each state and 2 from each territory. These guys exist to kind of hold the government to account and make sure each state is fairly represented in federal parliament. They also review and scrutinise laws proposed by the government. Typically, new bills or laws are first proposed in the lower house. If a majority of people vote in favour, then it will move to the upper house or the Senate. If a majority of senators vote in favour, then it's passed into law. Right. So, as I said, the Prime Minister made a lot of changes very quickly. But in 1973, something called the oil crisis whacked the global economy. That was where Arab countries stopped exporting oil to a bunch of other countries. And so petrol prices went through the roof. It had ripple effects across the entire economy. The Senate started blocking some of its bills, which led to something called a double dissolution. Time for crash course number 2. So, a double dissolution. That's a little trick in Australia's constitution designed to make sure Parliament doesn't stop running just because politicians can't agree. A double dissolution can happen if a bill is introduced in the House of Representatives and then rejected by the Senate twice, with at least 3 months in between the rejections. If this happens, the Prime Minister can ask the Governor-General to dissolve both houses of Parliament and trigger an election. In a normal election, all of the House of Reps stand for re-election, but only half of the Senate are up for re-election. If a double dissolution is triggered though, everyone is up for re-election. It's essentially a way for the Prime Minister to get new faces into both houses of Parliament, as a way to try and break the deadlock. That's what happened in 1974, after the Senate blocked these 6 bills twice. Mr Whitlam triggered a double dissolution, and Australians went back to the polls. He won. Just. But still he didn't have a majority in the Senate. In fact, he lost a few seats there. And this was kind of the beginning of the end for Mr Whitlam. There were still some lingering economic issues. And then in 1975, Labor was embroiled in something called the Loans Affair. Short of a bit of cash, the then Minerals and Energy Minister Rex Connor tried to borrow $4 billion from the Middle East to fund a bunch of infrastructure projects. The unconventional negotiations weren't exactly loved by the public.
Should he stay as leader now?
No, I think you ought to get out. Because you want someone honest, don't you?
And even though Treasury blocked it, Rex Connor continued to try and work out a deal with a Pakistani banker, Tirath Kemlani, behind closed doors.
How long have you been involved in this particular aspect of your business? Raising money?
Raising money only about 1 year.
Eventually, Mr Connor resigned. Then, with concerns about the economy, the Liberal coalition, led by this guy, Malcolm Fraser, started blocking the government's supply bill in the Senate. Supply is essentially what the budget is now, and if the government's budget didn't get passed, it would run out of money. Mr Fraser was essentially trying to force Mr Whitlam to call an early election.
Where will it end? It will end as soon as the Senate stops this nonsense, abides by the Constitution, passes the budget, and allows the duly elected government to govern.
Mr Whitlam wasn't budging, and he continually sent the supply bill back to the Senate, hoping someone would change their mind, cross the floor, and vote in favour of it.
The people of Australia want the government they elected to have a fair go.
No one did, and the government was in a deadlock for weeks. That was until the Governor-General decided to step in. So, the Governor-General is the King's, or in Mr Whitlam's time, the Queen's representative in Australia. They're generally chosen by the Prime Minister. In Mr Whitlam's case, after the 1974 election, he asked Paul Hazlitt to keep going for another 2 years, but he said no. Then he asked this guy, Ken Meyer, who also said no. Then he asked the Treasurer, Frank Crean, who also said no. Then he even asked his deputy, Lance Barnard, who also said no. Then, finally, he asked John Kerr, who eventually said yes. Good on you, John. A fair bit of their job is symbolic, and a lot of it is laid out in the Constitution, like giving the royal assent to bills, which is basically giving the final sign-off on a law once it passes both houses of Parliament. These are called their executive powers, but they also have reserve powers, which aren't written out in the Constitution, and instead come from long-standing traditions about the authority of the King or Queen. These powers include refusing a request to call an election, appointing a Prime Minister if there is no clear result from an election, or dismissing a Prime Minister if they lose the support of the House of Representatives. So, if they so wish, the Governor-General can wield a lot of power. Back to 1975. So, it's November 11th, 1975, and the Liberal coalition are still refusing to pass Mr Whitlam's budget unless he calls an election. Mr Whitlam won't budge though, and pretty soon the government's going to run out of money to pay doctors, teachers and all the other public servants. And so begins a pretty chaotic day. At 9 a.m, Mr Whitlam told the opposition leader Malcolm Fraser he was going to ask the Governor-General to call a half-Senate election, unless his budget was passed. At 10 a.m, Mr Whitlam organises to meet the Governor-General.
Never seen you fellas up so early.
At 12 p.m, the Governor-General tells Malcolm Fraser to meet him at Government House in an hour's time. At 12:50, Mr Whitlam goes to Government House to ask the Governor-General to call a Senate election. Instead, John Kerr tells him that he is fired, or dismissed of his duties as Prime Minister. About 20 minutes later, John Kerr has a meeting with Malcolm Fraser and says he'll appoint him Prime Minister if he can pass the budget. He agrees and is made Prime Minister by the Governor-General.
Fraser, can you tell us anything about your meeting with the Governor-General?
No, I couldn't on other occasions and I can't on this occasion.
Is your stand still firm about blocking supply?
Of course it is.
At 2 p.m, the budget is passed by the Senate because the Liberal senators have been told Fraser has been made Prime Minister, but no one told the Labor senators, so everyone voted in favour of it. After that, the Governor-General decides to dissolve both houses of Parliament and call an election. At 4:50 p.m, the Governor-General's secretary, David Smith, went to the steps of Parliament House to explain that Malcolm Fraser would be stepping in as caretaker Prime Minister. It was a bit hard to hear. Then, after that speech, Mr Whitlam spoke and uttered those famous words.
Well may we say, God save the Queen. Because nothing will save the Governor-General.
The whole saga caused a lot of controversy.
After what's happened, I could never again vote Liberal.
Particularly around whether someone like the Governor-General, who isn't elected by the people, should have the power to get rid of someone who is.
I refuse to be told by anyone other than myself which government I will have and will not have.
Eventually, Aussies went back to the polls about a month later, and Malcolm Fraser was elected Prime Minister in an absolute landslide. Labor actually lost 30 seats in the House of Representatives.
The size of the majority places a tremendous responsibility on us to govern in the interests of all Australians.
Since then, nothing has actually changed in our Constitution, or changed in the reserve powers of the Governor-General. So, technically, it could happen again.
I know what price I paid for what I did. I've no regrets about what I did because it was right. In the same circumstances, I would do the same thing, with all the consequences involved.
So far, it hasn't, and many reckon it's unlikely it ever will. But 50 years later, it's also unlikely we'll ever forget this chapter in Australian politics.